It is time for an interesting fireside chat. The topic for this session is Banking on Future, Innovations Redefining Vision 2030. Our speakers for this session are Mr. Sourav Dutta, Executive Director, IT IDBI Bank. Can we please welcome him on stage with a huge round of applause? And Mr. Samit Shetty, Data, AI and Automation Leader, West Region, IBM, India, South Asia. Over to you, gentlemen.
Okay, just maybe a footnote. The photo behind is not mine for sure. So basically, Vishy had a bad health and had to rest, and that's why I'm stepping in. But since morning there's a lot of sessions that's gone on, and you have, I'm sure, picked up a lot of stuff. But one thing I should, I think personally I should make this statement is, whenever I have had the opportunity of having a conversation with Sourav, I've always stepped out a little wiser in terms of, where the banking industry is going and how the industry is transforming, right? So Sourav, no pressure, but that's where it is, right? I'm sure you guys will also pick, some bits and pointers in terms of, or insights in terms of how the banking industry is moving ahead. One thing, sort of, what we have seen is obviously the banking has transformed, or the journey has taken a long mile, right, in terms of the journey of the banking industry, right, as someone was speaking, right from bricks and mortars to now completely digital. And I think the banking fraternity has understood that in few years we will have a new age banking customers whose expectation from a banker is completely different from what it was earlier, right? They would want to engage with their bankers a little differently as opposed to what used to happen earlier, right? Their expectation is the banking experience is a little more smoother, simpler, and at ease, right? While that is happening, they would also want their banking experience to be a little more personal. But when it is becoming personal, they would also want you to be a little responsible in terms of how you're personalizing that information to them, right? Like someone was mentioning, how personal can you get without getting too intrusive about it, right? So these are the kind of stuff that a millennial is expecting from his bankers, right? And that's how the banking industry is also trying to grapple with it and transform themselves around. So that's one piece that the banking industry is going through. The other piece that we are seeing in this fraternity, which is taken by surprise, if I have to say so, in terms of the digital payment, right? No one in India believed that digital payment will be such big phenomenon. And COVID has just helped accelerate that phenomenon to a different level. Today, the digital banking is about 40% of the entire, the digital payment is about 40% of the entire payment system that is there. And the projection is by 2025, this will flip upside down, whereas the digital payment will contribute to almost 72% of the payment platforms, right? So these all are the trends that is coming into the marketplace, and these are all the things that the bankers has to think in terms of the transformation, what they have to take to cater to these things. So in your mind or in your view, what are the trends that the bankers are currently seeing in the next 2 or 3 years that's going to transform how we bank today?
Yeah, thank you, Sumit. This has been quite a challenging day today, and with a lot of points and innovation things which are coming up, right? So I would like to talk about two things. One is that you already mentioned about UPI, the digital payment side, right? So that has really picked up, and in fact, other nations are also looking at it, right? So we have already made inroads into various other countries, and in fact, US is also looking at UPI. US and other European countries are also looking at UPI. So that is something that is definitely going to go forward. But again, the question remains from a brick and mortar bank, which is it's a symbolism of trust, right? A symbol of trust. So that is something which the banking industry has to retain, no matter how digital you get. So that is something that the banking industry must strive for. Although we have recent directions from RBI for digital banking unit. So even that, keeping that in mind to basically enhance the awareness of the customers. Because the end customer is the one, we have already seen that today, and also that has been the point for everybody, the government in fact, which the people miss. Basically the point is that the last person or the person who's absolutely at the end of the chain needs to be benefited from all of these. So digital payment is definitely a way forward. When we have seen all these small businesses, they have been using, it has been accelerated during the COVID period, and small businesses have been using the digital payment, the UPI rails extensively. And that's how we see the change going forward as well. On the other side is that from a big payments, we have something which is known as the CBDC, the central bank digital currency. I was speaking on that in the FinTech Festival in Delhi as well. So that is something also that we will see in the future coming up. So a lot of companies have tried it out, the central bank digital currency, that would help in many ways. But again, there are some challenges that needs to be ironed out before it can be rolled out fully for the country like ours. So to start with, we have cross-border transfer of money using CBDC, which will help save on the paper money and the transactions that would have. And also in terms of the compliance and regulation, central bank digital currency will be running on the blockchain or the DLT technology. So that would also, the advantage of DLT is that you get instant confirmation, and the reconciliation is instant, and the audit trails are there. So people talk about cryptocurrencies, people are paying money or doing transactions using cryptocurrency is not anonymous. So that is something that people have to look into, and the European Union has coming up with the cryptocurrency mechanism in which there is something known as forget the past. So those are the things that we'll see in the future coming up, but the digital currency is definitely going to stay. That is one. We'll see that coming up very shortly. In fact, it was announced for this year's budget as well. The digital currency will be rolled out sometime shortly, maybe early December or maybe the first quarter of next year. So that is something that we have to look forward to. Coming on other technologies that we have seen the proliferation of the machine learning, which has been there for some time. It's nothing new, but it is being just built on the capacity, the technological capacities which are built upon, and the cost of the technology is also coming down. Again, those are the trade-offs that you see with the volumes coming up. So going forward, what we would see is that digital payments would definitely increase. That is on the increase side. On those bulk payments will also increase, not only the small ticket items, but also the big ticket items would also increase. So that would be definitely there. Like I mentioned, one of the challenges is that how do you convert a digital currency into a physical one, right? So that is a challenge that I did a digital transaction, and how I get a physical money out of it. So that is something that has to be ironed out, and we'll see how that is being taken care by the regulators and the government. From the other side, from a technology perspective, like I was talking about, awareness is definitely one. So awareness, as people mentioned that they had various experience in levels of awareness. In fact, the ground people, the level at the, absolutely at the bottom level, they have the awareness coming up now with so much of attacks happening at various levels, right? So, so that is one. The awareness would definitely help in building more confidence in the digital payment side. That is something that we will see, and that is how it's going to flip. Like you mentioned, that is going to flip. That is a trend, and that is what is going to happen. The ease of transaction is too much, right? So that is how people would like to sit at the home and do transactions, go to the marketplace, don't take out the wallet and do the entire transaction without taking out the wallet. So that is something, I mean, that's a big experience, and people are loving it. It's not that it's, but again, there are, what are the, from a payments industry side, this, how do you tackle the MDR issue, the member discount rates, right? So because UPI, the digital transactions, it's not free. So how the government is going to monetize? So we have seen a lot of regulations. There's a paper came out which recently, right? So how to get the digital payments, how to fund that, and how to monetize and all of that. So that is something that is we'll see how that is also working out. But from a future perspective, definitely we'll see that the growth of the enhancement of technology is going to have, like somebody mentioned, that banking is now technology with the license going on, banking license. So we'll see that is increased. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that bank represents trust, right? So that cannot be shaken at any point in time. That's why we talk so much about the fintechs and regulators breathing down heavily on them, because fintechs in the agility, they have been bending a lot of rules, right? So that is something which cannot be done. And if you tie up with a bank, fintech and bank together, although somebody mentioned that bank becomes a choking point and holding back on the agility of the fintech. But we have to keep in mind that trust cannot be broken at any point in time. Whether it's a choking point, not a choking point, we cannot break that trust. Right? If that is gone, everything will come crumbling down. So that's why regulators have been breathing down heavily on the NBFCs, on the fintechs rather, not the NBFCs, on the fintechs who have been doing something which is not in line. Breaking, for example, you recently saw the PPI issues, right? And the governance issues in some of the new fintechs. We have seen a lot of that coming up in the newspapers, for example, BharatPe, right? So governance issue is one of the very important thing in how the fintechs carry out themselves, taking shortcuts. So those things should be avoided. And if the intent is good, definitely the outcome will be good. If the intent is not good, then the outcome will never be good. So people take the route of coming to the market to quickly encash on their on whatever they have got till now, whatever market values that they have got in paper terms, not in exact terms, right? So
the valuation game.
Valuation game. So that is something that they have to look out and be careful with what they are doing. So that is something that people have to be wary about. And going forward, what we're going to see is that the new technologies, which are already there, it's not that new, it's been just built upon, the scale would go up. That would be there. But my belief is that the brick and mortar bank would still remain. Although we've seen recently that Barclays Bank shut down 300 of their branches recently and made them digital and bringing it one to one particular big zone kind of thing, right? So they wanted to save on cost basically. Inflation rates going up in Europe and other places as well. We are quite secure in terms of the inflation. We are still controlled by the government and the regulators. So that is something that we have been quite thankful about. And going forward, definitely we will see that the proliferation of technology with the help of the building up on the existing foundations that we have, and definitely with new innovations of bringing up all them together, that would see us in a good future.
Absolutely. And as I said, right, really some of great pointers came out from this conversation, right? One, where you mentioned in terms of trust being the core essence of any banking sector, right? If trust is there, then the customer, the end customer who's actually going to use that services is going to stick around with you and going to transact with you, right? And the component of CBDC in terms of once that comes up, it's the transparency is there for the entire ecosystem who's connected in that blockchain to see transparently, right?
Correct.
While at one side, there will be a issue of in terms of, okay, now it is very transparent to the entire ecosystem, but on the other side, which is the core essence, is trust gets built onto the platform because it's visible to everyone, right? So absolutely, rightly pointed out, Sourav, in terms of the trust being the essence of it, right? But when we see all these innovations, right, when you put a CBDC in place, when you have a UPI, as you rightly pointed out, UPI also comes with a cost. And we recently saw a conflicting thought process where IRBI once thought that we should be charging a UPI transaction, whereas the government or the finance industry are thinking that, if you charge, then the adoption will be less. And at a point where UPI is being seen as a potential alternate to SWIFT, okay, is that the right thing to put a cost to UPI? So all these, when you adopt these transformation, a lot of challenges comes back to you, right? In terms of how do you manage. So when the UPI is growing at breakneck speed, how do you manage the back end, the technology piece of it, right? To help enable this. So what's your thought process in terms of what's your expectation from the technology world to help, enable this banking transformation that's going to happen in the next 2-3 years?
Yeah, so from a technology perspective, we are pretty good. We are geared up for that, right? So how we use the technology is something that has to be looked into, right? So you already have public clouds which are there.
Correct.
So what happens then? You particularly take for example, just give me a small example that you run some instances in the public cloud and you pay for that. Suddenly somebody feels that, and you have a particular budget for that. It's an OpEx, right? It's an OpEx model. So you have a budget for that. Now what happens is that somebody says, okay, let's make another instance of that. It's a good, and nobody wants to shut down that instance. So what happens is that at the end of the day, you run out of the OpEx budget that you already have.
Correct.
So it's basically a people problem. It's not a technology problem, it's a people problem. And then you say that it's a bill shock, it's people are surreptitiously taking you on a ride. So those things happen.
Correct.
But we have seen that it is not a technological challenge, it's a person challenge, right?
Correct.
It's a people challenge. One. Second is that from a technology perspective, we already have the foundations right now, and going forward, we should see how it's going to, how you bring it all together, like I mentioned before. So one is that definitely from a digital currency perspective, now digital currency will be successful if all the players are on the same platform, at one go. If they don't come at one go, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in a staggered fashion. So that's the biggest challenge for the digital currency. And the technology is already there. It's not there. Technology is there, only the adoption has to be done in a proper fashion. So that is something which we will see how it's going to progress. From other perspective, from a technology perspective, is that again diverse technologies come in. Diverse technology in the sense that people are trying to mix and match on the technology which are already available. So that leads to some kind of a discontent or kind of disharmony in the overall ecosystem of the, let me say, in banking industry, right? So from that perspective, one has to be very careful. I mean, I'm talking at a higher level, macro level, but if you go down to, just to give a small example, is that, for example, you have some components which are there in a DC, and the components in a DR are not similar. So there's always a mismatch, although the functionalities are same, but you don't get the same level of, so how does this happen?
Correct.
I mean, we are consciously doing it, we're unconsciously doing it, how does it happen?
Correct.
I mean, it's unbelievable, but we are doing it, right? So technology is there, but how you use the technology is up to you,
Correct.
right? So again, from an implementation perspective, you have number of multitude of databases, right? Which database to use when, how, right? So that is something that the person or the technology team has to take a decision. Just bringing in a new technology is not going to solve your problem, right? So that has to be thought through. So I feel that from a technology perspective, we are pretty good. From a capacity perspective, we are pretty good. How do we use it? How do we leverage it? Is a problem which the particular department or a particular team has to think about it very judiciously. If we just go on randomly picking up technologies, we're going to end up in a mess.
Interesting perspective to it, right? In terms of when the industry is transforming at breakneck speed, you have the technology, but to adopt that technology, putting a governance mechanism in place so that there is discipline in terms of how do you put the technology in place so that it works for you and not against you. As if I have to retranslate your messaging in terms of having the right technology at the right place to enable the transformation and not just pick something which you feel is break fix, put a solution in place and then forget about it, that the technology will look after it. There has to be governance in place to ensure that the technology that has been put in place is actually helping you grow and not pulling you back, right? That's very interesting perspective to that. As a concluding remark, right? There is a lot of impetus today that we are seeing, and this is maybe not very specific to banking industry. This is like an industry statement, a country statement, where even our government is pushing in terms of when you're running a business, banking as a business, if I have to say so, because today we are talking about that. How is the banking industry becoming more sustainable, right? And it's more from a standpoint of your carbon footprint that you're reducing. How are you ensuring that you are not contributing to the problem of carbon footprint and seeing that you're doing a business a little more greener than what you used to do in the past? So what's your thought process? How do you see in terms of becoming a sustainable business for the future?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, how to become a sustainable business. Banking is going to be there. As long as people will be there, banking, telecom, this will be there. So people will be speaking, people will be transacting, so that will be there. So I've got no worries on that aspect. Now from a sustainability in terms of the world as a whole, in terms of the footprint, the carbon footprint, dissipation and all of that. So we are seeing the technologies which are already there, right? But again, at the same time, people are not very judicious in their uses, right? So for example, UPI, just to give an example, if everybody, the senior citizen, for example, we talk about senior citizen, people over 65, they like to have their passbooks printed, right? They don't want to see it on the on the screen. So that's a big problem. For example, now with UPI coming in, earlier we used to have one transaction, just one entry in a month, or maybe twice in a month, like 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, whatever, small, like lower middle class. But now you're seeing with UPI coming in, coffee, right, tea, 5 rupees, 10 rupees, small value tickets, even going to, right. So that is going to increase the number of entries in your passbook. So how do you take care of that? And at the same time, the database size increases. Now I want to see my entire transaction. Earlier it was just 4 pages, now it is 40 pages. So that is the thing that you have to be very cognizant about, and how to tackle the history. How do you keep the purge the earlier data and all of that. So that has to be also thought about. Now coming from a greener footprint, like I mentioned, technology is already there. How do you want to use it is up to you. You can things are what we see in the industry. Like my experience has been, things are working still very much in silos. And no matter how we try to break it, it still remains in silos, right? So that is something that we have to, in fact, inside the department itself, the tech department also, things are in silos. So not only cross department, but inside the department. Somebody is thinking that way, it's not. The uniformity is not coming in. So that works against this kind of goal of having a lower carbon footprint, right? So again, people will always try to take a shortcut, right? So that has been the human mentality for that. So I don't know. I mean, this is, unless we change a bit, this is not going to change.
Yeah. So, yeah, and absolutely point taken, right? In terms of, I think when you have to build a sustainable business, and especially the example that you talked about, right? The older generation of bankers are still wanting to have a passport printed because they want to see a physical transaction on their book, right? So I think if to become sustainable, a lot of education and awareness is also required at the last mile, so that they understand in terms of what it means from an overall standpoint, so that these carbon footprint issues, etc., can be addressed, right? Absolutely rightly pointed out. And on the issue in terms of the interdepartment, being at silos, obviously the collaboration. How do we bring collaboration between these, so that there is a little more productive communication rather than a repetitive work, will obviously help in terms of building a sustainable business. So absolutely, I mean, as I said, right, whenever I speak to you, there is always an insight that comes out, an insight around the CBDC becoming the next big wave coming up, how UPI is going to change how we bank, and how educating the end mile is more relevant to build a sustainable banking business. Thank you very much, Sourav. Thank you very much for your time and sharing this insight with all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I think you're...
Thank you so much for the very interesting chat. I would request Ravi sir to please present both of our speakers with the newest edition of the Banking and Finance Post magazine.